Well, for more, we're joined by another special guest for today's programme, Ambassador John Bolton, the former US Ambassador to the United Nations and former National Security Advisor under President Trump during his first term. Ambassador Bolton, it's great to have you with us once again here on Al Arabiya News. This week marked the 3-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine. You said earlier on this week that you think President Trump has effectively switched sides when it comes to this war. What's your thinking behind that comment?
Well, by the statements that he's made about Volodymyr Zelensky being a dictator and yet refusing to characterize Putin as a dictator, he's named the wrong person. He has said, and many of his top advisors have said, they think that Ukraine provoked the war. They don't think it was a war of Russian aggression. And perhaps most visibly, the United States voting with Russia and Belarus and North Korea against a European resolution at the UN General Assembly condemning Russia's aggression against Ukraine. So the U.S. on one side, all of its NATO allies on the other side, unthinkable for any other president, really an embarrassment for the United States.
Yeah, okay, so that must have been a massive shock to you as a former US ambassador to the United Nations. You know, you are saying, in a sense, that President Trump is capitulating or surrendering to to the Russians. But let me put it this way. I mean, a lot of people we speak to say President Trump is trying new methods to address old problems. How do you respond to that?
Well, look, you can always achieve peace by surrendering. There's no doubt about it. That's not a new method, but it's one that you've seen in history. Trump supporters have a lot of ways of trying to explain what he says. It's all bargaining, you know, it's just doing it for effect. But the real problem is he doesn't have an overarching national security strategy or philosophy. He doesn't really understand what's at stake. And by comments he's made, such as saying that that Ukraine will not be restored to its full sovereignty and territorial integrity, that Ukraine will not be offered NATO membership, that the U.S. will not provide security guarantees in a post-settlement environment. All of these are Russia's positions, and he has given them away without getting anything in return before the negotiations even start. So for somebody who wrote The Art of the Deal, you'd think you would understand one basic point is don't give away the store before you've even begun, and yet that's what he's done. The only complaint the Kremlin has about what Trump has said is they're probably kicking themselves for not having asked for more earlier, because they likely would have gotten it.
What do you think all of this means then for the NATO alliance, given that, as you say as well, Ukraine has been told that it's very unlikely to be joining that alliance, and it's heard that from Washington?
It's a very bad sign. I think it would be a catastrophic mistake for the U.S. to agree to a settlement that left Ukraine vulnerable. You know, the West as a whole, the entire NATO alliance, didn't perform well in 2014, the first time Russia invaded Ukraine. And that was a basis on which the Kremlin could conclude that they could probably do it again and get the same reaction. So it just shows that appeasement ultimately doesn't work, and we're paying the price for it now. An inadequate settlement here would simply give Russia time to repair its badly battered armed forces, try and get its economy back in better shape, and then come back in 5-6 years once again for a third invasion of Ukraine, or to go after other former republics from the Soviet Union, all in aid of Vladimir Putin's stated objective, really, of recreating the Russian Empire.
Okay, President Trump is due to meet Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, tomorrow at the White House. You've been in President Trump's inner circle. What do you think he really thinks of Volodymyr Zelensky?
Well, I'm sorry to say he doesn't like him. He has not had good relations with Zelensky since the famous perfect phone call in the summer of 2019 about where Trump essentially threatened Zelensky with to withhold American security assistance if he didn't cooperate in looking into the allegations about meddling in our 2016 presidential elections. Trump often says he believes that if he has good relations with a foreign head of state, then the U.S. has good relations with that country. look, personal relations are a part of it, obviously, but ultimately matters of state are determined by national interest. And Trump really doesn't understand what America's national interest is. Vladimir Putin, whom he considers a friend, knows what he thinks Russia's interests are. Zelensky knows what Ukraine's are. But because Trump thinks he's Putin's friend, he doesn't realize that actually Putin is manipulating him. But he's Putin's friend, and he's not friends with Zelensky. That's bad news for Ukraine.
Okay, what about the British Prime Minister who's at the White House today, Sir Keir Starmer? Is that a relationship you see working?
Well, I think it's going to be very difficult to keep the special relationship together. I think the best thing that Starmer could do would be to flatter Trump and hope that that will satisfy his ego. Starmer could do a couple of things. He could offer to nominate Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. Trump wants it very badly, so why not nominate him? Shinzo Abe, the former prime minister of Japan, nominated him during the first term. Didn't go anywhere, but can't hurt to try again. Trump is enamored of the British royal family. He was never happier, in my experience, in 17 months in the White House than his 2 meetings with Queen Elizabeth. So I think if Starmer were to offer a state visit where Trump could meet now King Charles, met him when he was Prince Charles, at Buckingham Palace, I think that would go a long way for the United Kingdom.
Okay, well, maybe a state visit will be in the offing. Of course, there are some people in the British Prime Minister's cabinet who've been rude about President Trump, and he's expressed irritation at comments that they've made in the past. I mean, as someone who has known Donald Trump well, who's currently not on the right side of Donald Trump, but in the past has been on the right side, and you're not alone, and people do come back into the fold. Do you see him as someone who mends fences and patches things up when there's a relationship that's gone sour?
Well, there's one certain way to get back into Trump's good graces, and that's to kiss his ring. And so if Foreign Minister David Lammy is prepared to do that, I think all will be well. Trump is totally transactional and looks out for not the best interest of the country, I think, but the best interest of Donald Trump.
I mean, do you see yourself somehow patching things up, mending fences with President Trump, and therefore perhaps getting your security detail back, because that's been terminated?
Well, I don't know what's going to happen in that regard. Look, it's a symbol of Trump's personality that he cut off not just mine, Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, former Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley, really not taking the country's interest into account when American officials, current or former, are threatened by a hostile foreign power and the country leaves them defenseless. That's an incentive for the adversaries to take advantage of it. I don't think Trump cares about that. And that's why I think he terminated the security. What the future will bring, who knows?
And what does that mean for you, Ambassador Bolton, not to have that security detail?
Well, I'm taking steps to try and substitute for it. I have the highest regard for the Secret Service, but I will take other steps.
Earlier on this week, another headline-grabbing story was that AI video of Gaza that President Trump shared on social media. Seemed to sort of capture his vision for what Gaza could be. I don't know if you saw that video. If you did, what did you think of it?
Well, I think this is Trump at work. I think he's probably hoping on his next visit to the region to see the leaders of the Gulf states and ask them what piece of the action they're going to take on building the Eastern Mediterranean Riviera. Look, it's never going to happen, and I don't think really there will be a significant American role in whatever happens to Gaza. I think what Trump has done that's necessary is raise the question, really, what is the long-term plan for the citizens of Gaza? I think rebuilding a high-rise refugee camp would be a mistake. I think it's likely to lead to the same outcome we saw on October the 7th. And I think the part of the problem has been that the Palestinians, going back to the radical leaders of the region in the 50s and 60s, weaponized them to help throw Israel into the sea. Well, that isn't going to happen. So I would look to bring in the UN High Commissioner for Refugees to take over responsibility, certainly for the people of Gaza, and look to a longer-term solution that may mean resettlement. I'm not talking about forcible resettlement. UNHCR doesn't do forcible resettlement, but neither does UNHCR have permanent refugee camps.
Okay, Ambassador Bolton, I'm told you have to go. Just briefly, if you will, one word to describe President Trump's attitude to foreign policy. What word would you choose?
Well, I think his isolationist instincts are pretty clear in the way he's treated Ukraine and NATO. I think he is very transactional and really without much of a philosophy. And I think it's going to be a very dangerous period ahead.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for your time. Former US Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.